Hello. I'm talking about a topic. It's called education. Um, how concept can lead to inspiration. A lot of times, concepts are given in a very clinical format. In a lot of ways, these concepts can frustrate the audience. I say this because everybody comes to the table with their own preconceptions about how the world works. It's problematic because the world doesn't always work in the same fashion in every condition. What I mean by that is when you talk about energy doesn't always change in the same fashion through various mediums. And this got done with our presentation to the DOE, and I learned a lot. But what made me notice is that without an ideal concept, creativity is lost. You can lose an audience member in a certain way that they don't even want to pay attention to you anymore. They may be standing there, but running through their mind, they're trying to find out how can they um, make this make sense to what they've already learned, especially if they're a scientist. And they have tons of nomenclature to combat what you're trying to get across to them. Now, this is a conundrum. This is a paradox in itself. I call it Pandora because you'll have somebody that is very well versed in what they know, but they're trying to show you their way of understanding it as if it's absolute. And that's problematic because that does not propagate creativity. That, in effect, creates an argument. Hence, in the fact of how various disciplines talk about energy. If you're a biologist, energy is talked about differently. If you're a physicist, energy is talked about differently. Heck, if you're not in the same community of scientists where something is understood to be evident as this one thing or talked about in this type of nomenclature, it's an issue. So then it leads me to my next issue, which is internalization of theory. The theory cannot be analyzed correctly unless everybody's on the same page. Now, that sounds like I'm going in circles, but actually, I'm not. This is actually how science currently is. It's the reason why we have next generation science standards. You have biologists talking about and chemists talking about how energy is created through certain chemical reactions. Talk to a physicist, they'll get down to the most minute factors of what creates energy and what displaces energy. Now, that's not relevant to every single discipline. The only thing that is relevant is the standardization. What you need to know to pass a test. And that's kind of bad because that's kind of how I feel the American education system is declined in creativity. Nomenclature is nothing more than talking about a certain concept in a realm or a sphere that is most comfortable or most accepted by this community of scientists. I was reading the other day in this book, The Zeptosphere, which is kind of where I'm at. I feel like I'm walking into the Zeptosphere. It is not that we need to find, or I can just read it correctly from the book. The only true voyage of discovery consists in not seeing new landscapes, but having a new set of eyes. Now, in reading this chapter, they talk about how the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, was not quite yet capable of seeing how proton and antiproton beams will collide in a certain fashion to examine new forms of particles that are created after the collision. But the looming question for me is what if we, human beings, are only concerned with what we can internalize, or only concerned with what we can see and understand. Now, that is problematic for me because that type of understanding is limited, meaning we're not trying to find new ways of thinking. If you go back to the most ancient forms, I'm talking pre Socratic, Heraclides, the dude that taught Socrates his I know that I know nothing at all, you realize that he had a mindset of saying, well, I know nothing at all. So I'm going to ask questions to find the root of the matter in order to find out what I do know and what I'm most comfortable with. This is kind of like a third eye speak, looking beyond what the society of insects, that's all we are, is looking at. I mean, if you look at the sphere of what we know, we're 4% of the whole thing that we can observe. If I take that back, there's a whole lot of dark energy, there's a whole lot of dark matter that we just don't understand. Even with all our mathematical calculations, even with our quantum, classical, basic physics, you keep going down in disciplines. There's stuff we don't know. And that's good and bad because we're looking at all this, and what we can take from that is that there's a whole new frontier on multiple levels that we can still explore. The bad side to that is there's a lot of bias because what we do understand, we're going to fight to try to refine and make sure it stands as correct. There's an issue there because at some point we've deemed ourselves as sufficient in what we know. Only because we have so many people who agree on one consensus saying that this is what we know and this is what stands. But my question is basically, where are the fact checkers? Where are the people that go behind what the people who thought they knew to check these things that we thought we knew? And it's an age-old question that many philosophers, many innovative scientists have asked. And what's making this even more compelling to me is that we have a lot of children out here who will ask these questions and will ultimately get shunned if they don't talk in the same standardization that our society, Western, and I'll get back to that, Western, deems is correct. In my journey to Switzerland, I went to a lot of lectures. And a lot of these lecturers even admitted to the fact that there's stuff that they probably don't even know is to be true. Now, these are people who are good at group theory. It's a level of mathematics that is, I don't even want to touch because I barely trust mathematics in its current state. These are people who understand what was necessary to build the LHC. And they even said, hopefully you guys will figure it out because it's now time to pass the torch. That's a powerful statement. And it's funny because I've only heard it in Switzerland. Nowhere else in the United States or Western's culture. So now it leads me to believe that the emphasis of education is now more important than anything else that we've ever encountered. Because we can have a bunch of people on all sides debating on who's right. But how will we ever get to innovation? How will we ever get to the point where we actually create something that's going to actually propel us to survive in an encounter that we've never seen? Especially since we've done in science nothing more that's comparable to politics. The clock is now at 9:40 and counting, so I'm going to kill this video message and get my thoughts together some more. But this is just a small sample of what I've experienced being out here. Now, I know YouTube is going to allow me to go to about 15, so I'm just going to embellish a little bit. We went to this presentation, and There were nothing but chemists there and people who specialize in what, you know, the government likes to see. But me and my colleague, we study something that goes to the beginning of time, I believe. You take a collision and you look at what happens inside of that collision by doing reverse engineering. Now, I think that's profound because you could have somebody in a corner doing 1,000 calculations, and then later on they find that one little flaw, it's human nature, can make them wrong. How many times has this occurred? And we can rely on technology, but how about the fact that maybe we're not utilizing technology effective enough to analyze the right things? Maybe, as I said it earlier, we're only analyzing what we want to analyze, and it's because we don't even know how to use the instruments that we created to analyze things further. And it's possibly even further to say that we don't know how to analyze them because of certain biases. We have tons and tons of books that are rewritten every freaking year to try to explain what we thought we explained good enough or ideal enough. And then as students go through the system, like little good lab rats, they find that there's errors in these great books that we have, or the books that give us the nomenclatures that we use. Go figure. I think science is really built upon a scientific method, which is pre-Socratic in itself, from the research I've done. But I think we've gotten far away from that. We've gotten more about our egos than we have about innovation. And as a key, physics seems to be the one science that allows you to explore all of these indefinites. So this is a log from my friends and family, but more especially from my own son. I don't want him to get into the sciences and think it's pointless. There's value in it. You just gotta have your own footing in the right direction to get through it. Meaning you can't listen to what people tell you all the time. And you gotta go through the system and say what they want to say and play the role of being a part of the board. But nonetheless, you gotta be able to internalize and make sense of what you're hearing. Because there may be something wrong with what they're saying that may be the next Nobel Peace Prize. Today is 8/7/13. 7 is a very important number. It yields revelation. I had this epiphany. Like 7 yields a lot of revelations. Peace.